Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro. Today's guest is Matt Kouba. Matt, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Quentin.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So, Matt, I'm excited to just kind of catch up with you. You are a previous guest of the podcast. So all of you who are tuning into this episode with Matt, if you want to kind of hear his backstory, how he got into lifting, bodybuilding, kind of the normal, typical Behind the Muscle podcast, just go back to some of the previous episodes and you can catch that episode with Matt. Today, we're just going to kind of catch up in terms of how this prep is going. So, Matt, why don't you kind of give us a recap? What competitions did you compete in last year? And then why don't you just talk about your decision to compete in the Indy Pro for your first competition of this year?
Yeah. So I live in the Chicago area, and obviously with the COVID and stuff, everything was kind of messed up the last couple of years. So last year I did the Chicago Pro, but that was in Atlanta. That was my first show of the year last year. And then I also did the Tampa Pro. So at the Chicago Pro, I was 8th. And then at the Tampa Pro, I was outside the top 10. I forget what my exact placing was, to be honest with you. But both those shows were, relatively close to each other. But yeah, that's what I did last year. And I kind of always know when I get off stage, within the next week or so, I kind of set my sights on approximate time frame and what I want to look to as far as competing the following year. I've always done at least one show pretty much every year that I've ever competed. This will actually be my 29th show ever that I do the Indy Pro. And then, so getting close to 30 shows. It'll be my 9th show as a pro. But yeah, I kind of knew within a week that I wanted to do the Indy Pro. I wanted to do something a little earlier in the season. You never really know who's going to show up. I thought the Chicago and Tampa lineup were both really stacked last year. I thought I brought a really great look to Chicago, but the top 5, top 7 guys were just better. Just wanted to kind of start with Indy and then give myself maybe some opportunity from there. I know I want to do Indy, and then I'm doing Chicago, which is 9 weeks later. And this year it's finally back in the Chicago area, which will be cool. Because it'll be the first time competing locally since 2018 is where I did my pro debut, which that was also Chicago Pro. But then there's a few options as far as shows in between there. And I'm not dead set. We'll kind of see how Indy goes and kind of decide from there.
Perfect. Now, how many months then of kind of an off season from the Tampa Pro to the Indy Pro? How much time in between has that been for you?
So that would have been August, early August. So till now. So I don't know how much of an off season. I always like to take some kind of break after the competition season. I think some people try to ride that post-contest rebound and really they think they're going to put on a bunch of size afterwards. I think that it's just glycogen. You're going to be super full. You're going to feel pumped. I kind of work out just for fun. I'm not trying to push super heavy weights, just trying to get blood moving. But I'm eating more relaxed meals, at least for a week or two. Usually me and my wife like to go on vacation. So we kind of plan our vacations around my show schedule. So I'll be a little bit more relaxed there, but then I'll get into a structured off season pretty quickly after that. And yeah, I work with Chris Aceto, and so we kind of start, when we get into that off season mode. I'm still sending him pictures every 3 days. During contest prep, it's every single day. And it has been for a while now, pretty much for 10 weeks out. I'm sending him pictures every single day. But even in the off season, we're in pretty close communication and on a good structured plan. And then I just basically listen to him as far as when we don't have a set, contest prep starts now. It's kind of more of a transitional period. You might have a phase 1 where you kind of ease into things and then go from there.
Now, I had, like I mentioned before we started recording here, I had Dorian Haywood on yesterday, and he's also competing in the Indy Pro. And he was saying that there was a point like in his off season where, you know, he kind of his body just kind of started to reject the food that he was eating. Cause I mean, he was kind of like, he'd been in his off season for a long time. And he just, man, he was kind of starting to drag. His body's kind of starting to reject the food. He just kind of wasn't feeling that well. And then so him and his coach, Dave Califf, were just like, okay, it's time for us to kind of do a little cut and then just kind of like go into prep for the Indy Pro. How does that kind of work for you in terms of, does your body kind of tell you when it's ready to kind of maybe do a cut or kind of get into the flow of a prep, or do you kind of just easily transition into that prep? How does that work for you, Matt?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit different each year. I would say last year, so not this last off season, but like the off season before this one, my weight was up pretty high. So, I mean, I was like 305, 310, and I was not comfortable at that. You know, my workouts started to suffer. You know, your leg workouts are like, you're, you know, not breathing real well. You even get to the point where like your, you know, insulin resistance, you know, it builds up. And so you don't get as good of pumps even. So you think like, well, I'm eating all this food, I'm eating all these carbs, my pumps should be great. But, you know, once you get to that point and the pumps aren't good and it's affecting your workouts, then it's a bad thing. And then you got to step back and, like you said, either do a mini cut or, you know, hopefully it's time to start, you know, easing into that first phase, I would say, of contest prep almost. But this year we didn't really let my weight get above 295. I almost touched 300, but you know, that's a solid 10 to 15 pounds lighter than I was the previous year. So I didn't really get the kind of things that I had experienced the year before where, you know, my lower back was bothering me the year before. My breathing wasn't as good. We kept, you know, a little bit of cardio in, you know, year round. And it wasn't much, you know, sometimes it was just walking my dogs. But I feel like as long as I keep you know, we don't push food too hard and we keep my weight under control, then I feel like I feel pretty good. And I felt good, I would say, this off season. I thought it was a very productive off season and a good transition into prep. So yeah, I think every year is a little bit different. And I think I've gone both ways. I think sometimes you gotta, you know, bodybuilding is about pushing the extremes and pushing the boundaries. And so sometimes you have to do that, I think, in order to see what your body is capable of and when you reach that point. Because some people respond really well to that, where they have to just eat a lot of food and their body has a hard time growing. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely been at that point where it becomes a negative thing. And then at that point, you got to step back and reassess.
So what was kind of the focal point or your main focus in terms of like body parts or the tissue that you wanted to put on your body for this past off season?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think I feel like I've joked around in the past that I think over the years, I mean, I told you before, I think we even started record or like, I mean, I've been competing for 18 years now. So I think over the years, I've been told at one point or another, nearly every one of my body parts was a weak point, you know, and I feel like things have, you know, sometimes it's just putting in the time, man, and that you just got to let everything else catch up and things kind of grow at a certain rate. I do feel like at the pro level, I think the guys' backs are at, you know, so my back was, you know, a priority. And then my legs, I think being a taller bodybuilder, having longer limbs, my arms are good. They're, you know, my arms are pretty good, but I think being a tall bodybuilder and having long legs, like that's just always going to be a priority. And I think, you know, my legs look good, maybe standing by myself, but standing next to some of these shorter, more compact bodybuilders, you know, I'm over 6 feet tall. So guys that are 5'8" or 5'7", you know, if their legs are much shorter, you know, their legs are going to give that illusion of looking bigger. So legs were a big priority. And I think I did a really good job with my legs. I think, you know, some people look at my back and they think my back's great, but I know when I'm standing next to the guys that are the best of the best, you know, I'm talking, you know, I want to be in that top 3 call out at these pro shows. And it hasn't quite been there. And I could see that when I'm standing next to those guys on stage. So for me, in my mind, it's been the back. I think a lot of people's feedback has been the legs. So that was kind of where my focus was.
What have you found over all of these years of training and competing and being a bodybuilder? Specifically, let's focus on legs. So maybe there's a listener or somebody that's watching this, Matt, that, they're a quote unquote taller bodybuilder and maybe they've struggled bringing up their legs or something like that. But have you found some movements that you feel like really you have that great mind to muscle connection with, or that have really helped you bring up those legs? And if so, what would some of those movements be?
I'd say from my experience, I think the sequence of movements is actually the most important. So I pretty much like the general sequence of almost all my leg workouts is I start with some kind of leg curl variation, which lately that's been seated leg curls. Then I'll go to a leg extension. So I do like doing the 2 isolation movements first early in the workout. If I do leg extensions later in the workout, I don't get a good mind muscle connection. I don't get that full contraction, which is the emphasis on leg extension. So, I start with curls, I go to leg extensions, then I go to like a hack squat. I do like hack squats. I feel like that's a movement that I could go, decently heavy on, but very controlled still. And I get a good full range of motion. So I feel like that, activates the quads. Then I go to some kind of leg press variation. Lately I've actually been really liking it. It sounds like more of a girly machine, but like those selectorized leg presses where it's just, it's not like the plate loaded where I'm trying to go super heavy, but I'm hitting a little higher reps on those. So, I do, what I've been liking is I'll go like feet wide for like 8 to 10 reps and then feet close for 8 to 10 reps. And then I go into like a walking lunge movement as a finisher. And that's usually about it. If I throw in like 1 or 2 extra movements, I might throw in another hamstring direct movement, like a single leg laying curl I've been doing. So I'll kind of do my first 2 leg curls first, and then I go to leg extension. But basically you do your leg curl, your leg extension, you get 2 good compound movements, and then you have your walking lunge type movement. And then if you throw in any accessory movement in between, you could do that, but that's kind of the staple like outline. And I feel like, especially this year, I've like religiously stuck to that and gotten really good results. So I feel like my quads look by far the best that they look. My legs from the side look really good. So yeah, I've been happy with that.
Beautiful. Love it. Now, in terms of cardio, now, we're going to kind of transition kind of more into this current prep for the Indy Pro. In terms of cardio, what has that kind of looked like in terms of length, duration, and then what type of cardio have you kind of found that's worked best for you maybe over the years, or maybe has worked best for you during this prep?
So for this prep specifically, we've stuck with just steady state cardio, which I have a treadmill in my basement and I primarily use that. And it's literally just like a 1% incline, 3.4 walking speed. So nothing crazy. I do believe that once you've been in tremendous condition before, and especially if you're somebody that competes every year, I do think it's easier to get back to that level of condition as opposed to if you've never been in contest condition before. I think we even talked about that a little bit on the first podcast. I've been in, my first like 9 years of competing, that was a lot of times the feedback that I was getting, like, oh, he's got a good structure and a good build and balance, but he just doesn't come in condition. And it was like, crap, man, I'm like working my ass off and, what am I doing wrong? And it wasn't for like a lack of effort. I would do, whatever I could do, but some of that was just time. And in 2015 was like the time when I finally like got in tremendous condition. I was doing 2 hours of cardio a day. We did some periods of time even where I utilized interval type cardio where I would do like a hard 2 minutes and then like a steady 3 minutes, and kind of alternate back and forth like that. So not like a true high intensity sprint. I never really, the 30-second sprints, I didn't get into as much, but like harder portions, and that I would usually do on like the Stairmaster. So I think that, if you're somebody that has a hard time getting into contest condition, you got to like really push that at some point. And then once you've achieved that, I think that you can get into contest condition through steady state. And that's pretty much what we've relied on for this prep. Upwards of about 60 minutes a day, but I really haven't gone over that. So besides that, it's just been the diet. Like I said, I stayed a little bit leaner this off season. We kind of eased into prep. So it wasn't like, a rush kind of a prep. So things kind of just happened a little bit smoother. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've done for cardio.
So this prep, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I do check in with Chris every day. And so sometimes he might have me back off the cardio for a couple days, or, if we do in his, since I check in with him so often, he basically says like, oh, we're doing cardio every day. But then he might tell me once in a while I'm checking in and he says, take the next 2 days off of cardio or back it down to this for the next couple days. So to say that I'm doing, that much cardio every day is a little bit deceiving because, we are in such close communication that he'll kind of tweak things as we go, but that's about what it's been.
Let's talk about Chris for a minute here. I'm sure we covered him in the last podcast, but we definitely got some new subscribers and listeners to this podcast episode. So I've had quite a few guys on the podcast that have worked with Chris currently or in the past, and he seems like he's a very instinctive individual, and he's just got a knack for bodybuilding and coaching, right? There's not necessarily a blueprint. It's just kind of like, that check-in is going to basically tell him everything. Is that correct? And if so, why don't you just talk about maybe, the confidence that having somebody like Chris in your corner brings to you as a competitor, and maybe just share some advice with some people that are listening to this, Matt, in terms of if they're looking to find a coach, how do you kind of go about doing that? Right.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely how Chris is. He's very instinctive. We always joke that once one prep is over, he throws the file away. He doesn't save anything from year to year. So it's not like he's looking back to see, what worked last year. He looks at every prep as, being individual and unique. And so that's how he does things. And I mean, it does give me tremendous confidence working with somebody like him. I mean, he was somebody that, I had tried to get a hold of, and, it didn't work out for a couple of years there early on, but then, we started working together, and pretty quickly after we started working together, I mean, within a year and a half, I got my pro card, and I feel like I've definitely made the biggest improvements with him. And I think that, when you're looking to work with a coach, that's what I tell people is the main thing, is that you have to have that trust and confidence in the person. And so if you lose that, things are going to start fading away. And I tell people that that are working with me, because I coach people as well. And, I make sure that that they trust me. And if I even get a feeling that they're questioning things, I'm like, if it's early on in prep, I almost would encourage them to go a different direction, because you can't be questioning things, because as soon as that starts creeping into your head, then it's very easy to justify, cutting this short or adding this food or thinking that, you have a better idea. And, that's when things just go south quick. So I trust Chris 100%. I mean, he sometimes does some things that makes me scratch my head a little bit, but it always works, and I always listen to him. And he's really good at getting people in shape and peaking my body. So
what you being a coach and you having Chris in your corner and having other coaches in the past, what advice would you give to somebody that's just trying to figure out this whole coaching thing? Because even for myself, right, and for a lot of people, you get on Instagram, you get on social media, there's all these people that are, saying I'm the greatest coach. And look, I mean, it's just it can be overwhelming, right? So how would you recommend or encourage somebody that's kind of maybe just starting out in this whole process to figure out, what coach is right for them, or how do you even start that process from your perspective or your opinion?
You got to find somebody that you, number one, I think you connect with on some level so that you could either relate to them. So that might be, like we had talked before, I'm a taller bodybuilder. Maybe somebody's looking to get into bodybuilding. They're a taller bodybuilder and they look at me and they're like, okay, I could see some relation to his physique, or they see some of the stuff that I post and, maybe they could relate to that mindset. But I also very strongly believe that somebody who's really just like getting started out and competing, not to necessarily work with somebody like a Chris Aceto, who is like a higher level person, because he's been around, so long, and he's got, almost like, his way of like responding to you. It's very brief. It's very to the point. He's going to get you where you need to be, but you need a little bit more direction. So somebody like, you need somebody who's going to give a shit, and who's going to answer your questions a little bit more thoroughly and help you. I said that you need to have that trust there. And sometimes to have that trust there, you need to build the trust and you need to build that confidence. And so with some people, that just means, explaining things a little bit. So like I might tell somebody to do something, and I always tell people, I encourage them to ask questions, because, I work with a lot of people who are either getting started or, amateur level. I do work with a few pros, but most of them are, amateur, lower level, first time competitors. And so I want to explain stuff to them and give them that confidence to help build that trust. So I think that is very important. So work with somebody who's going to take the time. Don't necessarily work with somebody who's just got a big name and a ton of clients, because they're just going to, they might be able to help you get there. Like they might have the knowledge to, but if they don't help you build that confidence and build that trust, then I think you're missing out, especially from a early competitor standpoint.
I think, just being able to have some sort of a relationship with that coach, right? Being able to, as a client, being able to ask questions, like you said, the coach actually taking the time to, thoroughly answer those questions. And just, obviously it takes time to build a relationship or build a rapport. It's probably not going to happen in one prep, but I think, having two people, a coach and a client, that are open and willing to try to build some sort of relationship is really important, right? And that's whether it's, just prep coaching or even like being a trainer, like in person in a gym. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you about muscle maturity, because you've talked about just having you felt like maybe you just needed some time to kind of maybe get to that point of that conditioning or whatever. And you've talked about you've competed a long time, and sometimes you just it takes time, right? To get maybe certain body parts to grow, or just to get where you want to be. Do you feel like muscle maturity, because that's kind of some terminology that's thrown around a lot within the bodybuilding world, and some people might not even know what that is, but do you feel like, first of all, that's something that's real? And do you feel like that is something that you obtain as you get older and the more that you train? What's your perspective on muscle maturity?
I definitely think it's a real thing, but I think that it's also something that is highly variable. You could get younger guys that develop that muscle maturity look. I can't, names off the top of my head, I can't really think of, but I remember, we've all seen pictures of guys. It's like, that guy's 21 years old or something, or 22 years old. And it's like, they look like that. Like, it just doesn't seem, real how they could have progressed that quickly. And it's not just the size, it's the density and the way that they're able to, get that muscle maturity at a young age. And I wish I had an answer for that, but I just think it's one of those things that's like a kind of a variable that's just somewhat genetic. That, it's one of those things you can't be rushed. I don't think. I think that it comes from, I do think it comes from relatively intense training. I think that you have to train intense. I think that, especially if you're somebody that muscle maturity takes like a longer time to develop. I mean, I think, anybody I think could get there after years and years, and some people get there quicker. But that's why I think ultimately, if you enjoy the process, I mean, I always am very vocal about, how much I love bodybuilding and how much I think it's done for me in my life. And, but at the same time, it's always been really easy because I love it. And it's just what I've always wanted to do. And it's like, it never really, there's days here and there where it's hard, but ultimately I enjoy it, and it's rewarding and fulfilling. And so it makes it easy to do all those things. And so I just kind of like, took my time, I guess, and, worked my way up. And eventually I think that, once that muscle maturity started kicking in, that's when people were like, oh, wow, his conditioning is crazy. And it's like, I always was like in shape. You just couldn't tell. That was actually one of the first things that Chris, like, I think when I sent him pictures of like my last show, like before I started working with him, he's like, you could tell that you're, I forget how he worded it, but basically you could tell you're in really good shape, but it just doesn't quite show yet. And so I think that's, again, he's very short on words, but I think to some degree that's what he was implying. Maybe to some degree it was a little bit part of the peaking process, but I think more than anything, it was just muscle maturity and just getting my body to that next level. And so I was kind of right about there at that point.
So what's kind of like going into this competition season, Matt, what's kind of like your, goal in terms of, the Indy Pro, Chicago Pro? What would you like to accomplish this year, as an IFBB Pro?
I mean, yeah, I think it's funny or not funny, but I mean, I think some people, they set unrealistic goals. I think it's important to be somewhat realistic, but also to have high goals. I mean, eventually I do want to qualify for the Olympia. I do want to be in a position where I could win a pro show. I don't think that my physique is quite at that level yet. I think that, it's kind of like somebody going into the Olympia for their first time and thinking that they're going to win the Olympia. That doesn't happen really. And so I haven't been in the top 5 at a pro show yet. So that's my goal, is to get into the top 5. I think that once I'm able to do that, I'm able, again, that'll give me a little confidence, and I could build upon that. I think if I'm able to get into the top 5, then, start getting into those first call outs and being able to be compared to the top guys, and, obviously continue to make the necessary improvements, and get to that next level. So being in the top 5 is definitely where my goal is and where I see myself. And I think that that's realistic this year. And so that's what we're going for sure.
Love that, man. Is there anybody that you kind of know that's competing at the Indy Pro that you're looking forward to competing against, or are you just blinders on and just fully focused on Matt?
I mean, I'm on social media, so I'm not completely naive to the people that are going to be competing. I mean, the 2 people that I know have been on the show recently, Dorian Haywood, I've competed against him several times. He's beaten me every time that we've competed against each other, but we've always been pretty close. He's usually 1, 2 spots ahead of me. So he's a super nice guy. We talk, we support each other. Obviously I want to, try to beat him. So that's, you definitely have your eye on people like that who, and, but, obviously the goal is just bringing my best physique and doing what I can. And then also Brent Swanson, I know he was on there, good friends with him, and I've competed with him a bunch of times. And, we actually competed at like a local, like the Illinois State. That was when I won my first overall. And then he won junior nationals, or junior USA's like a few weeks later, and he looked like crazy. I was like, oh, good thing he didn't look like that at Illinois State, because he probably could have beat me. But yeah, I mean, so some of those guys we've had some good, competitions against and competed with them, and we have a good relationship. So it'll be fun to compete with Brent again. I mean, he did a bunch of national level shows that I did as well on my way to get my pro card, and just took him a couple extra years. But Yeah, and then I mean, I also talked to Justin. He's a good guy. He's probably the front runner to win the show. He's done a couple Olympias. I really like his physique, and he's always a super nice, supportive guy. So looking forward to definitely those three and seeing them and doing what we love to do.
For sure. Yeah. I know if this is Brent's pro debut. I know Jonathan Withers. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I'm sure you are, but I know it's his pro debut. The guy that I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's got that what is it? Cream of Rice company that he owns. He's kind of a funny guy. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, the cream of rice. I mean, I know Sean with the Pride Foods, but he's not.
No, this is I can't remember his name right now, but I know it's his pro debut, but it's going to be fun just having some of these guys that are making pro debuts, some of you veterans that are there. I think it's going to be a really good mixture of veterans, newcomers, and you never know who's going to kind of show up and bring their best package, but I think it's going to be an exciting show. Now, did you say you've competed at Indy Pro before, Matt, or not? This will be your first time.
I did. Yeah, I did Indy Pro in 2019. So,
okay. And it's a pretty well-run show, right? And pretty top notch, I've heard, right?
Yeah. Dave Bowers is the promoter. He's a great guy. He's really all about the athletes, and he's got a nice setup there. I think it's at a different venue than it was in 2019. I think ever since, because I went to it last year, but I didn't compete, but it was at a different location there. So I don't know, with all the COVID stuff, things have kind of bounced around a little bit, but yeah, I think, but he always runs a good show, and yeah.
Okay.
It'll be a good one though. I agree with you. I think there's an interesting, lineup of guys. I think it's going to be a very good competitive show.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. And I know Dorian was plugging it a little bit, but he said, I think it's for like only $9.99. They're going to have like a live stream for the Indy Pro. So I think that's kind of cool. I think that's something that one positive thing from the COVID time is that a lot of these shows started doing the live streams. And I think that's going to really encourage people that can't come to these shows to kind of tune in and support you guys. So I think that's something Dorian was saying. It's like only $9.99, which is pretty cheap to watch a bodybuilding competition live. So that's cool that they're doing that, so.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It'll be like an all access thing. So
yeah. Okay. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. I do want to ask you, because this is something that I see you post like all the time on your Instagram, and I'm a huge proponent of it, but you get a lot of body work done. Why don't you just talk about, and I think it's something that we discussed in the last episode, but I think it's something that you do, not only in prep, but in your off season. So why don't you talk about, just for you, the importance of getting that tissue work done on a regular basis? What kind of tissue work do you get done? Does it change during prep? Just touch on that for a minute, Matt.
Yeah, so I go to this guy, Brett. He owns Massage Mayhem, and it's a pretty well-known small place. I mean, he pretty much runs it on his own, but it's locally here in like the Chicagoland area and the suburbs. And yeah, he does a great job. It's pretty much deep tissue massage work. He does the full body. He does a little combination of, with some scraping. But super knowledgeable and, really good guy, really cool guy. He used to he's like in his 60s now. He used to be like in a rock band and stuff. So it's kind of a cool vibe that he's gotten there. It's not like relaxing massage music. It's more like he's playing rock and roll and really getting after it. So it's definitely different. Like if you're not like expecting it when you go in there. But he knows his stuff, and yeah, I go to see him pretty much every week, mostly year round. I mean, I might take, like I said, like after my show, we go on vacation, or I might take a couple weeks off then. But for the most part, if I miss a week, it's just kind of like a one-off. But we stay on a pretty consistent schedule with that, and it doesn't really, as we get closer to the show, he might not go as aggressive with like some of the techniques or the scraping. But then I also go to see occasionally, like if I have an issue, I have a good chiropractor. His name's Dr. Vukovic, and he owns Victory Chiropractic, and he's in the area as well. And he's awesome, though. I mean, if I have like an issue, I was having like a little issue with my trap, and he did some dry needling and some, other stuff with it, and obviously some adjustments. And I mean, within a week, it was like 100%. It was one of those weird little tweaks where it was like, it wasn't a knot, it wasn't, so it was like, I didn't really feel like you could massage it out. But yeah, I explained it to him, and he did a little examination, and so he really helped. So I think both those guys, I mean, like I said, Brett has been super helpful for me the last couple of years. I've been going to him for like 3 years now. And Dr. Vukovic, I mean, I've been going to him for a couple of years, but it's one of those things, like I'll kind of go to him when I need it. And then once he fixes you and you're, feeling good, I don't really get the constant chiropractic work. But if I have an issue that flares up and I need some specialty work, he's the guy I go to, and he does a good job.
Excellent, man. Yeah, I know. I see you post a lot in terms of, your massage therapy guy, and that's something I go once a week and get an hour session done of deep tissue, and my practitioner like does the scraping and stuff, So it's just, I just really think it's an underutilized part of bodybuilding and just like the longevity side of things. I mean, is that kind of like why you do it, not only for the current, but also just to kind of extend that bodybuilding career for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for longevity and, just keeping your body functioning. I mean, when you beat it up like you do, and just making sure that everything stays loose and kind of stays where it's supposed to stay. And, you don't get, these buildups, knots and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like my training and progress has been the best during the times when, the stretches. It's one of those things like, I don't know, it's like a supplement. Like if you're taking, amino acids, like you might not like feel it or like notice it like right away, but when you do it over the course of a period of time, the benefits. And so definitely, if you could, if you have somebody in your area and you could get in a consistent rhythm with them, like we said, it goes back to the coaching. If you trust the person, and I trust this guy, I know he knows his stuff and he knows the body, and so I know that the stuff that he's doing is helping me.
All right. Last thing I kind of want to touch on, then I'll let you kind of share any final thoughts or words, Matt, and we'll get you out of here. But I want to just kind of touch on your diet a little bit in terms of the prep. Are you kind of in the camp where it's like you kind of find foods that sit well with your stomach, your digestion, and you just kind of ride those foods out for the entirety of the prep? Do you kind of switch things up according to kind of what Chris wants you to eat? How does that kind of look specifically for this prep, and maybe even in preps of past?
Yeah, for the most part, you're pretty much right on point with that. I mean, I do, a lot of the basic bodybuilding foods. I mean, a lot of people, when they see me post up, I do English muffins in the morning. So a lot of people are like, why English muffins? Like, what's so special about English muffins? And kind of goes to you said. I mean, it's easy digestible. It sits well on my stomach. It's low in fiber. It's low in fat. So it's just, a good carb source. And it's something that's a little different. But, essentially it gets the job done. I'm eating it, my first meal is 6 whole eggs, and then I do like 3 English muffins. So, the fat slows down, the carbs from, so you're not getting like a huge spike. But essentially it works. It's, sometimes I think people overcomplicate it, and they think that you have to do oatmeal or you have to do cream of rice. And, I do cream of rice with my pre-workout meal. So that's part of my diet. But in the morning we do English muffins, and there's nothing that's super special about them, but there's also nothing that's super special about oatmeal. So, and then, in my other meals, it's either, a lot of them are lower carbs where they might just be protein veggie. But my other main carb source is just jasmine rice. So pretty basic stuff there for the most part. But yeah, we kind of have, like I said, we check in daily. And so we might have like, and we tweak things a little bit as we go, but for the most part, we kind of have like a moderate carb day, a low carb day, and we have like my non-training day diet, which is like really low carbs right now. It's only carbs in meal one. And then once in a while we do like a higher carb day, which is like a, big refeed day where it might include like a burger fry meal. And then also more carbs, but again, using the same foods throughout the day. So like English muffins, more rice. He will use things like a regular, like bakery type muffin with one or two of the meals. Again, it's just, those are easier to consume carbs. Again, a lot of people will be like, what's special about the muffins? Like, what kind of muffins are those? And it's like, they're just regular muffins that I picked up from Jewel, the grocery store. There's nothing special about the muffins. They're just an easy to consume carb source. And when you're trying to do a high carb day, it's easy to get those down, and, they work. So, easy on my digestion. So, we do stuff like that. We did like a high carb day like that on Tuesday. But then we're kind of back to more of like a couple moderate days. And yeah, so it kind of rotates a little bit. So you might look at it like it's almost like a somewhat of a carb cycle diet, but it's not like on a strict schedule. It's kind of based on my look and the pictures that I send him, and he's going by his instincts as far as more of a strict schedule.
Excellent. Any food or foods that you're kind of been craving or you're looking forward to having once this specific prep's over, or not really, just going to get right back on and stay on the regular bodybuilding food?
I always like the breakfast is usually my favorite meal, like post show, because like I said, once in a while we do like a burger fries meal, or, maybe we did a sushi meal during prep or something, but it's always been a long time since I do like pancakes or French toast or something like that. So I feel like after a show, and, as your appetite's just like insane. So you could eat this like massive breakfast. It's always hard to decide what to order, because like you look at the menu and like, I want the pancakes and I want the French toast. And so you get a little bit of everything. And then, but surprisingly, like my stomach always feels fine after that. I usually will eat like a big breakfast meal, maybe, let that food settle a little bit. Then I'll kind of go back to some bodybuilding meals, get in a little workout that day. But, I know I'm doing at least the Chicago Pro, and then, maybe something in between there. So I will have like that breakfast meal after the show. But besides that, kind of get back into a little bit of a rhythm. And then after the Chicago Pro, we're going to Hawaii. So we're going on vacation there. So me and my wife. And so when I go there, it'll be similar, where I'll kind of have like 2 free meals a day. And then we will pick up some food at the grocery store. When you eat on such a regular schedule, like you can't just go to eating twice a day. You'll be starving. So, especially when you're that lean. So I'll get some like chicken and rice meals and eat those like in between or whatever, some bodybuilding foods. And I'll bring my All Max, protein powder. But then I'll have, maybe 2 free meals a day where I'll go out to eat with my wife and just relax a little bit after the Chicago Pro.
Cool. Have you ever been to Hawaii, or will this be your guys' first time?
We were in Oahu for the most part, and then we were in Maui for like 2 days. So this time we'll be mostly in Maui, and then we'll be in Kauai for 3 days.
Cool.
So
that's kind of something fun to look forward to after competition season's over this year, then, for sure, huh?
Yeah. And I feel like that's the one time a year where I could really like shut my brain off from bodybuilding and step back and relax. Cause my wife gets it, and I think some other people that compete get it. Like once you kind of start getting in the thick of it in your off season and you kind of get in that rhythm, you don't really like want to break that rhythm. And it's almost harder for me then. It's like if we were to go, 3 or 4 months after, and like before I start prep, it's kind of like I feel like I'm in a routine and a rhythm, and I don't like getting out of that. So right after the show is, for me mentally, it's the best time that I could just kind of disconnect and give my wife the full attention that she deserves, and just relax.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's healthy that you do that. And you're talking about kind of getting into the groove of the off season. And if you live the bodybuilding lifestyle, whether you're an IFBB pro or not, or if you're someone that just loves bodybuilding, like that off season, as we know, if you compete, it's just as important as the prep, if not more important. And it is a type of prep. I mean, if you want to progress within bodybuilding, you have to take your off season just as serious as that prep. I mean, so I definitely get what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. You kind of get that momentum in the off season, you get that momentum hopefully in prep, and that's kind of where that progression happens. So Matt, first of all, before I do the outro and give you kind of the last say here, I just want to say thank you, my man, for coming on again. I know I think you're 2 weeks out tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yep. 2 weeks out tomorrow.
So I just want to say thank you, man, for taking some time out of your prep, out of your day, your busy schedule to just share a little bit of what this prep's been like, and kind of what your future plans are this year. I really appreciate it. If you have any final thoughts or words, any shout outs, the floor is yours, and then I'll close us out by the outro. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we pretty much covered everything, and yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to showing everybody a good package in 2 weeks, and hoping for a good contest season here. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. What's your Instagram, Matt, if people want to connect with you?
So it's just my first and last name. So Matt Kouba, Instagram. It's Kouba.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Matt. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, thank you. If it wasn't for you guys, the podcast wouldn't exist. Just a couple quick things here before we wrap up this conversation with Matt. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That's really important because I release all these episodes first on YouTube, and then I'll distribute them to iTunes and the other podcast platforms. So if you want to stay up on all the current episodes, make sure you're subscribed to YouTube, and then take this episode with Matt. Make sure you share on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Matt, tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.